Well, before the trip to Melbourne, where most of the characters established, there is just one more building block before there's...
Think I'll just let the mystery be. Think I'll just let the mystery be.
Hey guys, come over to The Leftovers, Season 3, Episode 3, Crazy Whitefella Thinking, and I know this review is very, very delayed. I really do apologize on behalf of that. I have been as you guys know, I went to Virginia last week, and I've been basically very tired since. I don't know really what's been going on with me. I've had a lot of allergy problems and things like that, but I figured, you know what, I don't really have many time to do reviews tomorrow, so I'm trying to get at least this review out, because you guys know how much I love The Leftovers, and I really wanted to be able to get this review out, and this was another amazing episode, obviously. I mean, the season is absolutely killing it. But this episode in general is a very unique episode because, sure, we've had these individual character-focused episodes, but most of the time the characters we're following are characters that we already knew or that we spent enough time with, and that it's just another chapter of their story. However, this episode, that wasn't exactly the case. We spent most of this episode with Kevin Sr., who, yeah, Kevin Sr. has, I think, always been a big part of this show, but he's never really been a main character. This is the first season where he's a main character, which I think was a very wise choice, and it's a character that we've never really known if he's actually, what his moral ground really is, what he actually wants to do. We've only really seen it through Kevin's perspective, and I really love the way this episode was done. We finally get to see him fleshed out. We got a lot of answers for why he is the way he is, and moving forward, I'm definitely very interested in seeing how this all is going to play out. But let's again get to the beginning, because the intro, once again, was a completely different song than last week. Like I said, this is going to be the normal thing for The Leftovers this season. They're going to play, I think, one different song every intro that applies to the episode. This week's was Personal Jesus, which I thought actually applied very well to the episode, especially when you deal with what Kevin Sr. is trying to do in this episode. But we actually start by seeing a younger Kevin Sr. when he was a police chief, and he's in his car driving, and basically a young Kevin tells him to go help the people or else they'll drown. And he tells him to pull over, and Kevin Sr. assures him that they will come up, and he feels Kevin shouldn't have to worry about them. But Kevin's very relentless, telling him to pull over, and you can see that even back then, Kevin was intent on helping people. He wanted to be, the savior. He always was interested in basically, trying to provide for everyone that he can, even if it put his own health at risk. And I thought that was really well done, the way we saw this. Because, sure, we know Kevin Sr. and Kevin have always been close, but we've never really seen scenes of them together besides what we've seen, after the departure. I thought it was cool to see some things with them before. But basically, we then see later that night, basically Kevin says he thinks they're dead. Kevin Sr. says they're not, because when ducks go down, they come up, and this is the natural order of things. And sure enough, he's right, as the people are actually completely okay. So in the present, we see Kevin Sr., he takes out this blank tape, and he starts recording some kind of aboriginal tribe. We don't exactly know what this is all about, but again, something The Leftovers just does so well is just take these really small, very weird details and just really make it so damn compelling. I mean, this whole journey, I was so hooked in. I'm like, what is the deal with this Indian tribe? Why is he so obsessed with this tribe? What exactly does this tribe, why exactly does he need to know more about this tribe? How do they really fit into everything that's going on? And I thought they connected that in quite well. Damon Lindelof basically said that the tribe is basically one of the the oldest living tribe still in the U.S., so I thought it was really cool the way they were able to do that, and I thought it was definitely a really great way to start off the episode. Again, very mysterious, but that's something The Leftovers always seems to excel at very well. So we see later that night, he goes into the tribe, and there are all these signs that are there, and just like Kevin, he's not really caring about what this is going to do to him or the repercussions this could have on him. He's really only interested in going into the area, and he lights a fire. He strips off all his clothes, puts this red headband on, and he starts to coat his body in the same oil, and he puts on the music, starts chanting in the tribe's language, and a few park rangers oversee this, and naturally ask him what he's doing. They're not, like, very hostile or anything. They're just like, what the hell are you doing? Like, why are you here? And Kevin Sr. casually says that he's preventing the apocalypse, and he asks them what they're doing, and that's something I really like, is that they really did take as much advantage with Scott Glenn as they could. Scott Glenn can do basically anything, and make it great on this show, and this episode really does prove that. He can give an amazing monologue, he can hallucinate very well, but he also is really, really funny. He really does do well at this very dry type humor, and there's a lot of that scattered throughout this episode, and that's something I think that really is benefiting the show as a whole. The show is not always super depressing. It has ways of finding dark humor in there, so that way it can keep you in and not completely lose you, because that was one of the many problems with Season 1, is that Season 1 was just too dreary, too depressing. It's still a very dense show, but it's not nearly as, I think it's still just as depressing, but it has a little bit more lighter stuff than the other seasons have, which I think is something that they've done well in these last two seasons. But basically, we see the officers, they take him back to their headquarters, and they take a picture of him, and one of the officers shows him this map and explains to him it's a sawn line, and Kevin Sr. is really not that impressed at all, and the officer quickly puts it away. He tells his colleague that he can go in, and Kevin Sr. tries to take the tape player back, and you realize this tape player is of great significance to him. You don't exactly know why, but again, you're just really rooting for him to get this tape player back, and again, we have no idea what it's about at this point. Like, what is his connection to this tape player? Why is he so fixated on it? Just the fact that he wanted it back, I mean, I really felt for him here. This is clearly something that's very important to him, and the officer tells him he can't keep that, and Kevin Sr. asks for the player at least. The officer tells him the chant recorder in the tape is actually stolen, and he took it without permission. So Kevin Sr. is kind of like a fugitive now because he stole someone else's tribe without permission, and Kevin Sr. says that one is fine. He just needs the other one that says Niagara 81. He says him and Kevin from a long time ago, and it's really important that he ends up getting it back. Now, this tape is actually the tape that we heard in the beginning of the episode. That conversation between Kevin and Kevin Sr. is actually that tape, and I thought that was a really good way of showing how much Kevin Sr. is connected to this tape. You know, it seems like this season, a lot of these characters are trying to hold back onto their glory days, you know, such as Kevin becoming a police officer again, trying to relive those days when he had his shit together, when he actually had a good family life, or Nora wanting to see her children again, because that was the best time in her life. For Kevin Sr., it was when I think he and Kevin went to Niagara Falls, and I really do like the way that everyone is really trying to reclaim some sort of item of the past, and I think it's something that really is working very well this season. Basically, he said it's really important he gets it back. The officer actually does agree to let him take it, and Kevin Sr. thanks him, and he then looks at the sawn line. He starts to mark certain spots to visit, and back in 1981, we hear more on the tape. Kevin asks why a man named Travis would want to kill the president, and basically, he's very concerned about Ronald Reagan being shot, and, you know, Kevin Sr. tells him, oh, it's gonna be okay, you know, he's just pretending and everything, and Kevin asks if John killed the president because he saw it in a movie, and Kevin Sr. says he didn't, but he tried to, assures him that the president's fine, and again, just that one conversation really shows how focused Kevin was on saving people. I thought that was something that they really did illustrate well here, that this isn't just a new thing in Kevin's life. He's always been someone who's taken an interest in putting his own health in favor of others. He's always wanted to be there for people, and I love the way this episode did focus on that. So he then listens to the tape, and he goes into a post office and tells the clerk he's looking for a man named Christopher Sunday, and he asks him if he knows the mailing address, and the man says if he's his friend, how does he not know the address? I mean, obviously, you know, if they're actually good buddies, what's going on here? So Kevin Sr. says he doesn't need a liaison because he's a member of the community, and the man says that she's over at the cultural center on Borland Circuit, and he asks if he needs anything else, and Kevin Sr. said he had his mail forwarded when he heard how helpful he was out there, and tells him his name, and the man gets out a FedEx package, asks for his ID, and Kevin Sr. tells him he unfortunately lost it. Now, you can tell at this point that Kevin's kind of lying through his teeth. He's clearly just doing whatever he can to get to these certain people, and they're not really questioning it because he's just a good job at sounding legit, I guess, but Kevin Sr. tells him he unfortunately lost it, but he can tell him the return address, which is actually Matt's address, we find out. And this is one of the more shocking parts of the episode. Kevin Sr. and Matt actually do have a connection here, which I thought was very interesting. And basically, he says if that's enough, he can tell him what's inside. He asks if he knows the best-selling book of all time, and the man says it's the Bible, and he says he is right, and that there is the goddamn sequel, of course, that being the Book of Kevin. Now, this is a theory that many people have had, that Kevin Sr. did somehow obtain the Book of Kevin. Now, a lot of people are thinking it was because that, as we know, Michael was on that website in the first episode, and what many people were thinking is that they actually did make this book viral and really anyone has public access to. Like, there's a copy online, people have read it that way, there's all kinds of ways to do that stuff. That's not exactly what's going on here, though. Basically, Matt sent the sort of, like, rough draft to Kevin Sr., which makes a lot of sense, obviously. This is his father. He knows Kevin very well. He's going through a very similar situation as Kevin. So it made sense why they actually did that. So he calls Mary's number, and I love this scene where he starts editing and circling things through the book that he's just not happy about. Like, he's really not happy with the way this is turning out. You're not entirely sure why he's so unhappy, but you can tell he just is not pleased with what Matt has done. So he calls Mary's numbers, and it turns out her and Noah are actually completely fine. And Kevin Sr. says his name is Frank Johnson from the Episcopal Council, and asks if he can speak to Matt, and Mary recognizes his voice. She says she knows Matt would want to talk to him, and Matt is apparently still living with them, and Kevin Sr. asks what he did. Matt says they're just working through some things. Now, I at first thought this was in the present, but we quickly realized this was actually 2 years ago. Like, this was way before Kevin knew about the book. This was when, clearly Mary and Matt have been going through things for a while. I think Matt has kind of been in denial because he's just been so pleased with the fact that she's awake that he really has not looked at the bigger picture, that things are not great between these two. And I actually really do like the way the show has put them here, because it just shows how naive and how close-minded Matt really is a character. I mean, he's someone who is so dedicated to his faith, and he basically relies on that for everything. Like, anything that happens, he somehow makes a connection to the Bible, and it's something I think that is really going to start to affect him, and that's him and Mary's relation. But I really do like the way the show has put them here. It's very sad to see that things haven't gone well for them, but I think by doing that, it's really given us more, of an idea of how Mary really feels about Matt. In reality, she doesn't really know if he's right. There's things they really don't agree at all, and I actually really do like seeing that now that Mary is out of the coma, they have a lot more opportunities to show how different Mary and Matt really are, which I thought was actually really well done. And really, that's shown immediately when Kevin Sr. asks Matt if things are okay. He completely ignores the question. Like, he just kind of dances around and says, oh yeah, we're fine, don't worry about us. His main concern right now is the book, basically, because he reminds him that the book is only supposed to be about what's happening to his son. And it turns out Kevin Sr. is not really happy that he doesn't really play much of a role in it. And Kevin Sr. says he doesn't want him in Australia or anywhere near it, and he says he's not a part of Kevin Jr.'s story, he's a part of his, and he's the one who guided him here, and he doesn't know why that isn't in his book. So to Kevin Sr., this is his story, and Kevin is just simply a part of it, when that's really not the situation here. I mean, Kevin is the one who's had most of this stuff happen to him. Kevin Sr. has just kind of been away. Like, he's been searching for meaning in Africa for, quite a few years, and he's really been away from it all. And I think that what I really loved here is that we really do see that, yeah, I mean, that he did have a purpose for doing that, but he also felt that by doing that, he would basically do what Kevin is doing. Like, he would be the one to save people, and I really do like the way that Kevin Sr. is so intent on doing that. And basically, Matt says he's sorry. He asked when this happened. Kevin Sr. says it was when he was 8 years old, and Matt says that children typically aren't featured prominently in Scripture, and Kevin Sr. asks about Abraham's kid, and Matt says that he was a grown man, 36 years old, and Kevin Sr. says that really makes no sense at all, and Matt asks if he got the money he sends him, and Kevin Sr. says he did, and he asks what it's for, and Matt says it's just to help him out. But Kevin Sr. knows what's really going on. He basically asks if it's not, so he'll keep his mouth shut and not tell his son he's writing an unauthorized fucking biography about him. And Matt says telling him would not be a good idea. He needs to go through his life without knowing any of this, and I mean, that's obviously not what happened. Kevin eventually did find out. And this was really the first clue to me that this wasn't in the present day. This was clearly a flashback either 2 years ago or 3 years ago. And that's really my main thing with this episode, that they don't really tell you a lot about the time frame. Like, I really didn't know when some of these scenes are taking place. That was just a little bit confusing to me. I didn't really understand when exactly these scenes are taking place. And I get it, that's part of the Leftovers nature. Like, they try to be as mysterious as possible, but I just didn't really feel like they gave us much insight into where we really were. And maybe that was the point of the episode, but right now I wanted a little bit more awareness of when this actually was. I think it just would have made the scene a little more impactful. But basically, Kevin Sr. says it would be in his best interest to pick up some scuba gear, because if he falls down, there's gonna be under a lot of water. And Matt wishes him luck. Kevin Sr. tells him to go fuck himself, and he hangs up the phone. And then he sees this huge rainstorm start to develop, and I love the way this rainstorm basically foreshadows a lot of what's going to be going on this season. Well, we'll get into that in a second once we get, to a little bit later in the episode. But he runs into the community center. He throws the manuscript into the trash because it's completely worthless to him. He just thinks it's a bunch of bullshit. And he comes in, asks them if Sharon is around, and one of the men working there says she's in the shitter. He can wait in her office, and the man asks if he knows him. Kevin Sr. says that he sure hopes not. And Sharon comes out, and Kevin Sr. again, basically, she asks what brings him here. He says he's looking for a man named Christopher Sunday, and he was told that she might have an address for him. She says the name rings a bell, but if he's making a documentary, he has to go. And just that one little line I thought was very interesting. I guess a lot of people make a documentary about Christopher Sunday. We're not entirely sure why, but I thought it was kind of interesting. The fact that she thought he was there to make a documentary. Basically, she says that, and he basically tells her that he's really only there seeking enlightenment and his counsel, nothing else, and she says she will have to accompany him. He says that he wouldn't want it any other way. She says that she will see if she can get that address for him. He sees a picture and asks if it's her son. She said it's actually her grandson. He wants to be an astronaut, and Kevin Sr. says his son wanted to be an anchor on the news, and his wife passed away of cancer a long time ago. And I think that's really the first, acknowledgement in regards to what happened to Kevin's mother. We really have not talked about it that much, and that's because it happened so long ago. And we'll talk about how long ago that really was, because I didn't really know the time frame with that. But before she tells him where Chris is, she sees a picture of Kevin wanted, and he says he'd like her to hear his side of the story. And I love that immediately she's thrown off. Like, obviously, she's not going to help harbor some fugitive, but he is everywhere, and I really love how much damage that he's really going through there. Like, obviously, this is a really bad situation for Kevin Sr. I like the way he's trying to get away from all that, but obviously there are certain things he just can't run away from, and I thought this, again, was very well done. Really heightened the tension of the episode. So he quickly gets out of there because this obviously is not going to do him any good at all, and he actually does get to Christopher Sunday. I didn't really know if he was going to, but he did, and he says he is, and basically, he asks if he's Christopher Sunday. The man says that he is. Kevin Sr. says it's an honor to meet him and introduces himself, and he says he came a long way to find him, and Chris says that he's really scared, and Kevin Sr. says he is, and Chris asks what it is, and Kevin Sr. says he used to hear voices. They started about 5 minutes after the departure, so they actually put him into a mental institution. And I loved the visual here. Like, just that one little, just not even a scene, just that one little shot of us seeing a younger Kevin Sr. in his police chief uniform, just looking at what happened and then turning around and us seeing him start to twitch a little bit and him be very confused. That really signifies how jarring hearing these voices really was. I mean, it's basically on the same level as Kevin hearing Patty and his connection with Patty, and I really love the way that they are connecting those two things, because, yeah, they did go through very similar situations, and I think that's really how this is going to go. They're going to go through very different paths, and I really love the way this was done here. And we find a lot of information here, but it wasn't really a dump of a monologue. This is stuff we've wanted to know for a long time, and you can understand that Kevin Sr., he's been walking around the Australian desert for so long, and he's really just wanted someone, I think, to just confess to and finally see if he actually is crazy or not. And this is really the time where he can finally open up to someone. And basically, he says that he stayed fighting with someone no one could even see, and then he stopped fighting and started doing what they told him, and the last thing they told him was actually to leave and come there. And he says he would prefer a little specificity, but he figured that the instructions were forthcoming, and he always wanted to check out the Opera House, so he actually flew to Sydney. He bought a ticket for Verdi, put on a nice suit, and he's on his way to the hotel when a hippie with a red band walks up to him, asks if he wanted to talk to God, and that's gotta be it. He says he did, and the hippie said that he had to talk in God's tongue, which apparently apparently is an experimental drug hallucinogen, and the guy brews in his basement. He wakes up 2 weeks later in a hotel room in Perth. So we find out that actually did happen. Remember that whole hotel room that Kevin went to in Purgatory? Yeah, that actually did happen. Kevin Sr. was indeed in Perth, and he says that the officer comes, there's a smoldering mattress next to him, a bunch of white dudes laying around in war paint, and he has no memory how he got there or what actually happened when he did. Also, God did not talk to him. He felt it was a waste of time and simply just a misguided detour. So he really just felt like he took a wrong turn and that this was really pointless. But then comes the most interesting part, where he talks about the TV in the hotel room is on, and you're thinking he's going to say, oh, I saw my son. But that's not what Kevin Sr. saw. He actually saw a chicken on it, and he says on October 14th, a small town of only 14 people in the outback lost the entire population, and all of them vanished, including the animals, except for one thing, that being an egg. And 2 days later it hatched, and they named him Tony, and at first no one really took him seriously, but then rumors started, and rumors that the chicken could help people find whatever they were looking for, and he took it really as a sign, like, oh, you know, this chicken could actually really help me out here. Maybe this chicken could actually help me get some sense of direction in my life, and maybe he could actually talk to him. So he took it as a sign. He hopped onto the train 4,000 kilometers, and he goes to see Tony, and he gave the guy his money, and basically he put the chicken in front of him. He asked what he's looking for, but he didn't really know, and he needed Tony to tell him. The guy told him it doesn't work that way. He has to give him something, and I like that Kevin Sr. really didn't know what he wanted. Remember, he was just told to come to Australia. Very vague instructions, so he's really unsure, and he basically said he was looking for purpose because he doesn't really know what said purpose is. And at that very moment, he jumps onto his peck, starts pecking what turned out to be the tape for Niagara Falls, and that's why Kevin is so intent on keeping this tape, because Niagara Falls is the thing that is his purpose. And Kevin Sr. explains that when Kevin was 8 years old, his wife gave him a tape player for Christmas, and she died 5 months later. So he actually kept it with him all the time. And that summer he took a road trip to Niagara Falls. He drove him nuts recording everything they said, and he says he likes listening to it, and since that was the tape that Tony Peck rewound it and waited for one last voice to tell him what to do. Again, this is really Kevin Sr. trying to hold on to those glory days, when things were better in his life, when things were just simpler, when Kevin and him actually had a really great relationship, and it's just really heartwarming to think about it. Then I thought that was just a really well done scene. I love the way that was all done. It was a lot of information that I think that we have been waiting for. Like I said, never really felt like an exposition dump, but it was really beautifully performed by Scott Glenn. It tells us everything we need to know that Kevin Sr.'s been up to in the past several years, and I really love the way that was done here. So he then starts the tape, and Kevin is asking him to sing a song to get the rain to stop, and it actually did. So you see that Kevin Sr. feels that this song is kind of the way to stop everything. He stops the tape, and he tells Chris the thing that we have all been waiting for. We all know there was that scene in the trailer, and well, we finally get it here. He says that he believes on the 7th anniversary departure, he believes the rains will come, and with them a great flood, and he has to sing to make it stop, which is insane, but I've said it a million times. Because of how so many just weird, out there directions the show has taken, this isn't really that far. This isn't really that insane to really think about. I mean, it very well could be true. And Kevin Sr. says that if it's the last one, and he's the only man alive who knows it, and Chris says his song is bring the rain, not stop it. And Kevin Sr. says that's all subject to interpretation. And Chris asks if he wants to stop the flood. Kevin Sr. says he does, and Chris basically tells him to start with this. He sees this leaking roof and asks him to start there. He goes onto the roof to check it out, and Chris asks if he can see the problem. Kevin says the swamp cooler is leaking like a motherfucker, and Chris asks if he can fix it. Kevin Sr. asks if he has a pipe wrench or duct tape, and Sharon actually catches up to him, which you can just see the fear in Kevin Sr.'s eyes. Like, he was doing everything he could to outrun this one, but she actually did catch up to him, and he tells Chris not to believe a word she says, tells her to remember that they have a deal, but right when he says that, he loses balance and actually falls onto Chris, and then they're both taken into this ambulance, and this is just when things start to go really downhill for Kevin Sr. And we've seen this done before. Like, we've seen characters go through absolute hell, this kind of just takes the cake, though. Like, what Kevin Sr. went through here is truly traumatic. And basically, he tries to get him to wake up, but the doctors tell him to settle down. Kevin Sr. says he's just concerned. I mean, this was the one man who seemed like he would be able to give him that last song and finally get him to fulfill his quest that he's been going on for all these years. And that when they get to the hospital, he won't say anything. He tells him to nod if he can hear him. The doctor tells him to sit. Kevin Sr. tells the doctor he's acting in his best interest and needs to show a little respect for him, but they throw him onto the sand. He walks through the field while on crutches. He sees a man in the distance. In the end, a lot of people have talked about this next scene here because he sees this man in the distance. We don't exactly know what this is all about, but this man, he actually is pouring gasoline on himself, and he tells him to stop, and the man says that they didn't take him, and you're thinking, okay, he's talking about the departure, but then he pulls out a lighter. Kevin Sr. tells him they didn't take most of them. He's not alone, but that was 7 years ago. Turns out, that's not what this guy is talking about. He asked him if he would kill a baby if it were to cure cancer, and Kevin Sr. says he wouldn't, and the man then says that is exactly what he said. And before Kevin Sr. can stop, he lights himself and the car on fire, and I'm sure we're going to get back to this. I mean, a lot of people have said that this really doesn't make a ton of sense, but again, so many things the leftovers have never really made any sense, and I think this is something that we are going to come back to at some point. I'll talk about what I think this really means, but right now, all I'll say is I think this man is definitely connected to the whole Mark Lynn-Baker situation, where, all these people are being essentially vaporized, and they're going through that device that will just bring their loved ones back to them, and this man clearly did not fulfill the test, and it seems like if you don't fulfill the test, this is exactly what happens to you. So I'm very interested in seeing where this is going to go. I'm sure we're going to come back to this at some point, but I think this is really setting up how dangerous a situation this really is for Nora, and I can't wait to see how this is really going to play out, because this was definitely quite, just really crazy to think about. I mean, the fact that this man just literally set himself on fire and didn't really care, he just felt like that was the only direction he had. I'm interested in seeing really where this is going to take us. It's clearly just these very risky measures, but it seems like Nora's willing to take that risk. I'm interested in seeing really where that's going to go next week. So at this point, Kevin Sr. is slowly losing hope. He puts his crutches into the car. He begs for water, says he's an alcoholic, and he tells God he knows what he's trying to do, but it's not going to work. And, he thinks God's trying to stop him. He can't stop him, and it then starts to pour rain onto his backpack, much like he thought was going to happen. And then, by far, the most tragic scene in this episode, where he cries out, he puts the tape into the player. It's all distorted. The tape is now destroyed, and you feel terrible again. This was really the best time in his life, and it was the only way he could recapture these glory days, and it's the one thing that he really felt was motivating him during this quest, and, to get back to those times, and knowing that the tape is actually destroyed, you feel terrible, but things are even worse when he sees a snake like the one in Sharon's painting, which I love how seamless that really was. Like, he just talked to Sharon about this snake, and you didn't really think it meant anything, but then we actually see that snake, and he talks to it, says if he goes down, he doesn't think he's going up, so he needs to eat it because he doesn't feel he has another choice. And he says he's sorry. He tells Snake it gave up its life with something greater than itself. He tries to kill it, but he ends up actually getting bitten, and he walks around despair, and he's kind of hallucinating as well. He sees a cross, and he goes onto it, and at this point, Kevin is near death. Like, I genuinely didn't know if he was going to make it, and he looks in the sky, and he sees a woman riding out in the distance, calls out for help. He then wakes up in what appears to be a little boy's room, and he goes into the house to call for someone, but no one seems to answer. So he then calls Matt, who asks him if he knows what time it is there, and Matt is really looking worse for wear. And this is the one part that really confused me, because this seems like it's a lot later. Like, this seems like now we are in the present day, and Matt clearly, we saw that scene last week where he was coughing up blood and had a bloody nose, and, he told Nora to just ignore it, it didn't really matter. But now we see him here, and he's sick, he's under a blanket, he's just really not looking well at all, so I really think something is happening to Matt, and it's something that really is deteriorating his overall health. And I loved this scene overall because basically Matt says he's happy that he called and asked if he can send the photocopy of the book back to him since he gave Kevin the original one. And Kevin Sr. tells him, oh, I threw it away. It didn't really matter. And he says he needs him to call the Carippa Hospital, find out if Chris is one of the patients there. But Matt is still focused on the book. Remember, this book really is the last way he can hold on to these values. Mary's gone. Mary's God knows where. He doesn't know where she is. Kevin doesn't believe in it. You got a lot of people who are starting to move away from all this stuff. He's now got a lot of people in his church, and I think he really wants this to stay. Like, he wants to be able to hold on to those religious values, and this is really the last thing that connects him to that. And Kevin Sr. says he doesn't know where he is, but once he does, he's gonna need his help in getting him out of the hospital. And Matt then says something that we've never really seen him say before, but he actually tells Kevin Sr. to go fuck himself. And this line was so significant. One, because Matt has never, I think, sweared on the show before, which is definitely a big deal, because you know how much he is devoted to religion and how much his values really mean to him. So for him to get so upset, that little line there, it really does signify, how pissed he really is at Kevin Sr., how much this really meant to him. By him not getting this, he doesn't really know where the hell he's going in life, and I think that was definitely very well shown here. I really did feel bad for Matt here, but there's definitely something going on. I'm interested in seeing what's going to happen, but he goes outside, he sees people setting up a boat for the upcoming flood, he tells them that he needs to get to the hospital in Carippa, and asks them if there's any chance they can get him a ride there, and the woman says the house will take better care of him than the hospital will, and Kevin Sr. asks if they know Chris, and the woman says they all know each other since it's a tiny country, and a man tells Kevin Sr. that Chris is actually dead from the fall. Yeah, he actually did kill him, and he goes in the house, he sees a bottle of pills from someone named Caleb, and he takes out one of them. He goes to the fridge, basically just desperate for food at this point because he's been walking around for so long, and he's searching for food, and he finds a book inside the fridge. I don't know why there's a book inside the fridge, but he flips through the pages, he sees many pictures of a family, he then ends up falling asleep, and we finally pick up where things left off last week. And yeah, we know obviously this is where we were leading to, but we finally get to that scene that we saw last week, and it's much more, even more rewarding than I really could have imagined. So we see him, he goes to Grace, he asks if he likes, and basically her four horsewomen drowning the wrong Kevin, and he comes out, asks what they're up to. They then shoot him with a tranquilizer dart, and Grace sees him the next morning, asks if he'd like some tea, and she asks how his arm is, and he says it itches like hell. She says they got a lot of brown and tiger snakes out there. She gave him the anti-venom just to be safe on the, just to be on the safe side, and she says that he looked through her photos. He says that he was hungry and it was in the fridge, and she introduced herself. She says that she'll turn herself into tomorrow, and you know, she thinks that, you know, you're here to arrest me, you're here to confess to what I did. And the reason I think Kevin didn't really care that she committed this crime is because he just also accidentally killed someone. I mean, he didn't mean to kill Christopher Sunday. He's in as bad a position as she is. So I think that's the main reason why he doesn't really care. And the other ladies he saw had nothing to do with it. Maybe he'll consider leaving them out of whatever. He tells the police. And he asks if she's all alone out there. She says she is, and we get the tragic backstory of Grace, which is really more tragic than I think anyone could have imagined. He asks if her family's gone. She says yes, and it was on the 15th. Obviously, because as we know, Australia's a day ahead, so therefore it would be October 15th, not the 14th. And he asks if she was with it. She says that she was downtown, and the register girl vanished right before her eyes, and she was holding a box of cereal, and she took it with her. She says she knew it was the rapture right when it happened, and she finally made it home the next night. And she knew the child would already be empty before she set foot outside. Their Bibles, her son Liam's, her daughter Abigail's, David's, Samantha, Jimmy's, and Sam's, and her husband, all in a nice, neat row. And when she saw them in that moment, she felt so blessed because God showed that her family now sat by his side. And for 2 years, she spread his word and endured and held true. And she thought everything was fine. Like, she thought, okay, my family's just in a better place. And I think it's interesting that she actually wasn't freaked out. Like, she actually felt a bit enlightened by this. Like, maybe, you know, she felt like this was kind of confirmation that her family's okay. You know, wherever they are, they're gone, but they are okay. That is until she got this phone call. The remains had been found in her property, which were the remains of her 5 children. Basically, they were just boned, bleached in the sun. The phones were down. They had no way of ever knowing if she was coming home or if she had disappeared like their father. So they actually set foot across the desert alone, and obviously they ended up dying of heat stroke, which is just so tragic. I mean, the fact they didn't even depart, they straight up died, and she thought they had gone with everyone else. She never even considered searching for them, and if she had, and she says she took the cross from the chapel, brought it out there to mark the place where they died, which is where she found him. And you're just seeing, finally, Grace is getting to admit what actually is going on to her. Again, just like Kevin Sr., you get the sense she hasn't really said anything in a long time, and she's finally getting to confess to someone who's going through a very similar situation that she is. And she shows him a page of the manuscript, says it was in his hand, written like scripture, that she'd never seen before, one she'd never seen or heard of before, and it tells of a man, a police chief named Kevin, who drowned and passed in the land of the dead. So this is how she knew about Kevin. She spoke to them, freed them from their pain, rose again, and it's just 20 kilometers from there. She asked him what the chances are of that. She says she went to him, asked for his help. When he refused, she drowned him because she thought that he was testing her and that he'd come back. And once she proved her faith, he would have no choice but to let her talk to her children one last time. So she thought that he was sent by God, sent with a message just for her, but he's not an angel, and there is no message, and God doesn't care about her. So at this point, she's denying it. Like, she doesn't think any of this could possibly be true, but Kevin Sr. knows very well what's going on. He tells her that actually she's not crazy, and he says he doesn't think that she really is crazy at all, but she just got the wrong Kevin, and that is the way this episode comes to an end. Really great stuff overall, but let's just get into where I think we're going to go from here. So once again, guys, another really amazing episode, but there really is a lot to take away from this episode, as usual. First of all, let's talk about this conversation between Grace and Kevin Sr., because that last line, when he says you just got the wrong Kevin, I don't think he's talking directly to Grace. I think he's kind of talking to himself. Remember, this entire time he thought that he was the savior, like he was the one to save all these people and ensure that he could stop, the end of the world from happening and stop the flood and things like that. But I think he's slowly realizing that he's not the one to do that. It's his son, that is. And the fact that Kevin Sr. isn't really going to play that role, that he's just in Kevin's life, I think kind of scares him a bit. He doesn't really know what other purpose he has in life. And I think, honestly, he might have to let Kevin go, if he really wants him to fulfill his quest. Like, if he really wants Kevin to be able to save these people, I think he might have to maybe put Kevin on the back burner, unfortunately, which is going to be really sad, but I feel like that's kind of the only way he can go, because there's clearly a reason why he doesn't want him in Australia, and a lot of people have speculated, and I'm going to agree, that Kevin is going to have to be sacrificed, for the flood not to happen. And it makes sense, too, because there's that flash forward where Nora said she doesn't remember a Kevin, so maybe she has found a way to forget him, or she just doesn't like to talk about him. So I think that was definitely very interesting. But beyond that, I really love the flashbacks of Kevin Sr. and Kevin. Well, I wouldn't really say they were flashbacks, as they were over a tape, but just showing how Kevin Sr. was trying to get back to his glory days and how much the tape really mattered to him. It was just really sad to see it all go. I really did feel bad for Kevin Sr. My other big question is he really going to get away with all the shit he's done? I mean, these are some pretty big charges. Theft is definitely one. He stole that tape, and he's got illegal footage of the Indian tribe on there, which is not something that he asked permission for. He has left a police station. He accidentally killed a man. I mean, there are a lot of things that he's done, and I think after a while, there's just a lot of insurmountable damage, and I don't really know if he's going to be able to come back from this, so we'll have to see really how that's going to go. I doubt that he's going to be completely cleared. I mean, the things he did, again, were pretty serious, and I don't think he's just going to get away from it all, so we'll have to see the way that goes. As far as Matt, it's understandable why Matt feels the way he does. Like, when he, again, tells Kevin Sr., go fuck yourself, he's saying that because of how passionate this is to him. I mean, that Bible follows everything he believes in, and for Kevin Sr. just take that away from him and have no access to that Bible, because, again, he's not sure if Kevin still has it, or if he burnt it. He has no idea if he actually did. The fact that that means so much to him, I think that scene really shows that. When he says, go fuck yourself, this is what matters to him so much. He can't really think of any other word. Those values are kind of pointless without that Bible. And I think it's very interesting the way that's going. But like I said, I think there's something much bigger than Matt is hiding. I think, honestly, he is dying. I think the fact that he doesn't have those values as much, I think that's starting to really cripple him. And I think, honestly, I could see him dying. And it makes sense why, because the 2 episodes we've seen him in, he's been near death, and since this is his final season, they could easily kill him off. So I don't know if Matt's going to make it out of the season alive. I don't know if that's really going to happen, if he'll actually make it out of the series alive. I think something much deeper is happening to Matt than we think, and I'm interested in seeing really what's going on with that. And then I guess the only other thing to talk about is this man that lit himself on fire. We're definitely going to come back to this at some points. The fact that he said, would you kill a baby if it were to cure cancer? And he said no. Clearly, there's something really screwed up about the whole Marklin Baker thing, and I'm really interested in seeing how that all goes down. I don't think Nora really realizes what she's getting herself into. I know she's there obviously to expose them, but if she really is considering possibly following this, I mean, I'd really take a step back after information like this comes out, but I'm sure we're going to see something like that again. Also, why does Kevin Sr. not remember what happened in Perth? Clearly, we know that he was on the screen. Kevin saw him, but he saw a chicken. Why is that? Why didn't he see Kevin? I don't really know what that's all about. Overall, guys, this was another really amazing episode. This season continues to absolutely kill. If I had to have one complaint with this episode, like I said, I just wasn't really sure when the time frame really was, and I think that overall did it didn't lessen the impact, but I felt like knowing where we were would have made us have a lot more sympathy towards Kevin Sr. Because I did, but just knowing, was this 2 years ago? Because clearly we did go ahead 3 years. Like, we went 3 years in time, and I just didn't really know when everything was really taking place. So if you guys could maybe give me some sort of map or give me an idea of when certain scenes take place, that would be much appreciated, because I don't really know when that time jump really did take place here. Overall, guys, this was another really amazing episode. Highly satisfying stuff that I think we've been waiting for a long time. And I'm definitely going to give The Leftovers, Season 3, Episode 3, Crazy Whitefella Thinking, a 4.75 out of 5, or an A. So over, guys, for this episode of The Leftovers, and much you guys saw this episode overall. Sorry this review is so late. Like I said, I've just been really tired, and my allergies have just been absolutely kicking my ass, so I really have not been able to get any content up. I'm going to try and get other stuff... Excuse me. I'm going to try and get other stuff up this weekend. But that's my review. Hope you guys enjoyed. We'll see you guys in my next video. I don't know what it's going to be. It might be for American Gods, but I will see you guys for that. Okay, bye.